Okay, hi everybody, welcome back. That was quick. We used to have the 15-minute turn and now we've turned it into 10. I think I like it better because we can just keep rolling through all of these great topics. I want to real quickly highlight the features on the screen, the resource window on the right side with sponsored resources that you can download. And we also have a Q&A window, so please be sure to send in your questions since we are live. And this is going to be a panel discussion. We love to have some audience interaction and questions. So please go ahead and send those in. Once again, my name is Brett Norton, and I've been with Beyond Clean now for a couple of years. So welcome back. And time to introduce our speakers for this panel. Our first is Leroy Richardson. Leroy is been in SPD quality safety, and he's a compliance coordinator at St. Luke's University Health Network. He's passionate about empowering reprocessing personnel to continue their education, grow their knowledge, and become advocates for regulatory compliance. Tracy Raymond is the Director of Education and Onboarding at Vested Medical. Tracy is a quality-driven and passionate SPD leader who is dedicated to educating, training, and mentoring the next generation of sterile processing professionals. Jamie Hinkle is the resource specialist at St. Luke's University Health Network. Jamie is an experienced sterile processing professional who is passionate about providing educational resources through her SPD team. Joining us as a host for this session is my colleague, Bobby Parker, who is the VP of Clinical Solutions here at Beyond Clean, and I'm sure most of you know him from a number of other panel discussions and conferences throughout the years past. The presentation title is HR Pro Tips, Finding, Retaining, and Motivating SPD All-Stars. Where did all the technicians go? It's the question on the minds of every HR professional and SPD manager across our industry, and one we hope to tackle during this action-packed panel discussion. Our panel of experts are joining forces to help equip you with the tools necessary to attract and retain that rock star sterile processing technician for your department. From questions you should be asking during your next interview to the key motivation tactics that will improve your employee engagement with your current team, this discussion will help you build the dream team of high-performing technicians. Please join me in welcoming Leroy, Tracy, Jamie, and Bobby to the virtual stage.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction, Brett. And hello, everyone. Good to see you. I think we still got some popping in here. While we get our cameras figured out, I'll give us a bit of an introduction here. Hello, Sterile Processing Universe. Very excited to be bringing this topic to you all today. And thanks again to our sponsor, Census, for making the conference possible today. I love that we are talking about HR tips in a conference about productivity. We can get a little bit laser focused, little tunnel vision, a little bit blinders put on about productivity and crunching numbers and crunching data and fixing processes. And all of those things are absolutely necessary. But when it all boils down to, at the end of the day, is do we have the right people in place? And you know, I'm a big advocate of people over processes. And so it's my hope that this presentation, this panel discussion, is going to draw on the wealth of knowledge, experience, resources that you all bring to the table to share some good tips and tricks to help our leaders out there build some excellent teams of just SPD rock stars. So before we get started, just as a bit of introduction, I know that Brett gave a little bit of bio, but could you say hello to the audience and tell us number of years in sterile processing and maybe what experience you've had with direct reports and HR pro tips?
Absolutely. I am Tracy Raymond. I've been in the field since 1995, so almost 30 years. Been a manager for a good probably 20 to 22 years of that. So lots of experience in the hiring and training and so forth.
Awesome. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Leroy Richardson. I've been in sterile processing a total of 21 years. The last 11 years I've been a manager. I've had direct reports. I've also supported an education role, and now I'm in the quality role. So developing and helping employees of all levels of experience.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Jamie Hinkle. I've been in SPD for 40 years. The last year and a half, I am the resource coordinator, and then 14 years prior to that, I was a supervisor.
Very good. Well, thank you all for joining us. I wasn't doing the math along the way, but based on my gut, I would say between the four of us, we've got about a century of sterile processing experience in the digital room, so plenty to draw from. I'm the baby of the family here. I've only been in sterile processing around 12 or 13 years. I haven't done the math on that either, but excited to be talking with you all about this today. Kind of an icebreaker here to kick this conversation off, because I know that all of you mentioned that that your start in this industry was more on the front lines as a technician. So think back to kind of those early days in sterile processing, and maybe tell us a brief story about the really first motivating experience, either big or small, that you can remember as a sterile processing professional.
Sure. For me, the biggest was when I had just recently gotten in the field as a tech. My aunt had to have major surgery, and she happened to have it at the facility I worked at. So getting to talk with the nurses and the surgeon and that type of stuff really kind of lit that fire in me to know and understand that indeed every instrument I touch touches a patient and their family.
Absolutely.
Great. I actually will share a similar educational opportunity. Within my first year as a technician, I was being developed and learning to be an independent technician. And I learned or grew my love for SPD from a defect. I made the same quality defect 3 patients in a row in the same day. So my assembly or incorrect assembly of that tray affected 3 patients. And I understood after my follow-up meetings how important our role was. And I made sure to stay focused on that unknown patient that can be affected by our performance.
Yeah. I love that story, because as we're getting into motivation, we can get caught up in the idea of thinking about motivation only in a positive sense of, you know, what kind of stereotypical pizza party can we throw to get people, you know, plugged in and bought in and motivated. But oftentimes it's those really negative experiences that we have that we can use to motivate us. I'm thinking about my own sterile processing career and have had a similar experience to that. And have had technicians who've gone through similar experiences, and a very difficult to clean tray that came out dirty in the OR one time really crushed one of my technicians, and her response to it I thought was really admirable. It was, I'm going to learn how to clean this tray the right way, and I'm going to take personal ownership of in-servicing everybody else in the department on it, and whenever I see it come through, I'm going to try to grab that tray to make sure I'm the one to get to do it, because I want to make sure it's right. And yeah, just really being motivated by doing what's right for our patients. That's a good word. What about you, Jamie?
I think mine is when I first started in SPD, we didn't do OR trays. When the OR moved from one floor to the next and we started doing them, they threw me in as the person to learn everything. And then I, in turn, had to teach everyone else. Now, you're talking, I was probably 20, maybe 21. I think that threw me into like the leadership role from the beginning. Even though I wasn't a leader, I was just put into it, and it made me want to do more. I wasn't a follower. I was a leader. And that definitely pushed me into it.
I love that. Sometimes we get thrown into things that we aren't ready for, and we just have to grow and figure it out. And so I love that that's your story. You may have raised some eyebrows for people when you said when you started in SPD, you didn't do OR trays. What did that look like?
So we did storeroom function. We went out and did inventory control. We did do some trays, like cath lab trays, interventional radiology, labor room, but the only thing we did for OR was sterilizer trays.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it was a true kind of central supply, materials management type stuff as well. Yeah, that's really cool.
The early 80s.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you all, as we dive into this, I want us to go ahead and jump into it. I know that motivating and retaining and educating our people is so important, but we got to start with how do we find them? And that is getting ever increasingly difficult these days. And so in your experience, just working in sterile processing departments and working alongside human resources and recruiting to try to find potential candidates for sterile processing, I just want to ask the question, in your opinion, like human resources, recruiting, in your opinion, do they get sterile processing? And if they're missing the mark or don't get it, how do you find your people?
I'll jump in first on that. So a lot of times they don't get it. We are the on scene, right? Nobody really knows what we do. So after struggling with not getting any applicants or resumes with job postings, I finally called the recruiter and said, I don't want you to pre-screen anybody. I want you to send me every applicant and resume that you get, and I will do my own pre-screening, because we can train the skill if they have the right attitude, customer service skills, and that type of thing. So what they were failing to look at is some of those other aspects that can really make the great SPD tech, form.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I definitely want to probe deeper into that comment that we can train the skill if they have the right characteristics, the right attitude. I want to know how you judge that, because I found that to be exceedingly difficult to know. Because in the interview process, there are things that you can do, but in some respects, you never know. Some of the interviews I remember being most excited about, the technicians turned out okay, and some that we hired because we really needed somebody ended up being the best technicians that we had. So, definitely want to dive into that some more later on.
Sure.
I would agree. I think that in my experience, I think it also depends on the recruiter's experience as well. I think if you have a newer recruiter that hasn't been involved in SPD before, they could definitely have some vacancies in understanding, and especially if they only read your job description, it's very brief. So I do feel like we have to meet with the recruiters or whoever your HR leads are, and make sure they understand what it is that you're really looking for in a candidate. Make sure that the expectations are set, and then as you have applicants come through, I agree with Tracy. I think the pre-screening process should be more led by the SPD leader that can differentiate different experience levels based off of somebody's past work history. So I do think that HRs, they do or they mean to do a really good job, and sometimes they just need education to help you.
Yeah.
So I know from experience, we've had our HR person come through SPD because they don't know anything about SPD.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it kind of gives them a sense of what we do. So when they are interviewing or doing the first interview, they kind of understand what they're looking for. Even that doesn't always work, but it does help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice. Rather than going to their office, maybe bring them to yours and walk through the department. All three of you mentioned meeting with your HR representative to kind of realign or maybe just take the reins entirely. Are there any conversation points that you would recommend in that talk to have with your HR representative, of tips and pointers that you want to give to them in terms of looking for candidates, or types of things that you like to see on an applicant's resume that would make them an attractive candidate?
If it's okay, I'll jump in there.
Yeah.
I think in my experience, the reviewing a candidate together, that might be interesting. I think that having the review with the recruiter to understand what did you see that was a positive, or what may have been a red flag that you want to bring forward, and then kind of setting a template and saying, well, this is what we dealt with that candidate, and we wouldn't want to see that in any others either. That might help to set a framework.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because then it helps align yourself and what they look at, and then it helps align them with what you're going to look for. For myself, I like to see some sort of a customer service based experience, because that's what we do. Not only are we technical in the trays, but we have to have a customer service mindset. So I kind of like to see if they've had any of that type of skill in their past.
Yeah, like a Chick-fil-A kind of background, right?
Yeah.
We did love those, because they work really hard, and it's their pleasure all the time. So
all the time.
Yeah, that's a good one. So yeah, customer service, working with your recruiter to look through an applicant. Anything you want to throw in there, Jamie?
I think too. So in the Lehigh Valley, we have a lot of warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some really good experience with some of those people who've worked in warehouses. They do have customer service. They do know how to pick, because that's what they do all day. And that's what we're doing. Like, we are making sure that the orders are correct. So,
yeah.
I have to say, the other thing I've always said is, when I'm walking you into my department, if you can't keep up with me, you're probably not going to make it.
Yeah. Just the physicality.
And I hate to say that, but, like, we've had some people who, like, they just don't, you could tell if they're motivated or not.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think, every sterile processing department is different, but all the ones that I've worked in, the level of physicality was up there. And I think maybe that's where it helps bringing your HR representative into the department to see. Maybe they've got more of kind of a lab mentality of what goes on in sterile processing, but there's a lot of moving and lifting and pushing and transporting. And so, yeah, I mean, having that kind of experience for a long period of time in an environment where you need attention to detail and are moving things around in a logistics type environment like a warehouse could be a really good transfer of skill sets, or at least judge of what they can and enjoy doing. The only thing that I would add to that from my experience is length of jobs. I know in any industry, it's difficult to take a chance on a job hopper, but particularly in sterile processing, if they have no prior experience and we're going to train them from the ground up, just the breadth of knowledge that we have to impart in this technically entry-level position is so far beyond the other entry-level positions in the hospital that we can't afford to train somebody for 5 months and then lose them right away. We really need them to be there for 2-3 years if we're going to get a return on investment in the training that we give. And so, there are no promises made in a resume or even in an interview, but at least seeing that pattern of, okay, this person settles into jobs typically for 3 years would be a good thing to see in a resume. So maybe having those conversations with HR could be useful. I want to hit pause on that conversation and say, aren't we being a bit precocious and presumptuous by saying only want these resumes? I imagine a lot of our leaders, particularly out in rural areas, are rolling their eyes at us right now saying, well, I'm glad that you can be choosy about the resumes that you get. I'm not getting at any applicants, and it's getting worse. And I'm sure that you all have experienced that as well with critical staffing shortages. It is getting more and more urgent to find technicians, and it is getting harder to find them. What do you think is the reason for that? Why are we seeing fewer applicants come through? And what have you been doing that would help you be successful in finding people in that kind of environment?
It is hard. And I'm not in a rural spot, and it is still hard to get them. I have found that working with a local college, whether they have an SPD course or not, you do have students there that are going for some sort of a healthcare field. So working with them, maybe go into a job fair at their college, do a job fair at the high school. You know, I rolled into the field basically almost out of high school, and it fell in my lap. But wouldn't it be nice if we could help those high school students develop some sort of help them career minded, right? So try something like that.
I agree. I think I started right out of high school as well, and I think that it helped me find purpose. So I think that coming out of high school and not having an idea of what I was going to do or what I wanted to become, and I pursued accounting, and here I am in SPD 20 years later. But I think that having an opportunity to meet with developing minds, so whatever stage you feel that is, helps them to understand that there are options out there. And I think that when we don't, in our area, we've experienced that our collegiate partners don't really have programs specific to SPD. So we had a unique opportunity for us to start our own school, which we're on the heels of starting in the next couple months here. And our goal is to grow our own technicians through the school and then retain them through contracting. So hopefully that'll help us to not only build our own technician field, but to retain them as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, like I said, we live in the Lehigh Valley, and there are a lot of warehouses. That's where people are going. They don't, when you talk to people, it's not about benefits. It's about money, and they don't even care about longevity anymore. Mm-hmm. When I started in high school, I was in high school when I started working at the hospital. My idea was I was coming here and I was going to retire from here.
Right.
And I don't hear that from anybody. And when you tell them, about benefits, and they're like, I'm not really worried about the benefits, because they're, usually younger and they're not worried about what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a shift in dynamics there. And I think there's a lot of different reasons that play into that, but it is something that we have to navigate. Sorry to cut you off, Leroy. Go ahead.
I was just going to talk about how I think COVID kind of contributed to the situation we're in. I think the pandemic, forced us to learn how to maneuver and operate in, a hectic time state. And I think that a lot of people learned how to survive with less physicality in the work field. So I think people are less inclined to work harder for a lower dollar amount because they don't need to anymore. I think they've learned how to sustain without hard work.
Yeah, could be.
That may be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, along with that, is they saw hospital workers went to work no matter what. They didn't have the opportunity to stay home.
Yeah.
And they're all liking that. They all wanted to. They don't want to. Nobody wants to be in a position where you're putting your life in jeopardy, but we all did it.
Right. Yeah, through COVID and snow days and all those things, hospital workers are there taking care of patients. And I don't know. There are the bright spots out there that find that desirable and want to have a mission and be a part of a bigger purpose. And so I guess the question is, like, how do we find those self-motivated people? My only advice that I would give in a situation where you've got postings out there and no applicants are coming through, or the ones that do come through are ones that you've already interviewed and have decided not to move forward with, is get actively involved in the recruiting yourself. You may say, well, I'm the department manager and I'm also our educator and I'm also our supervisor and I'm also our instrument specialist and all of the hats that you have to wear. I don't know, you're incredibly busy. But some of the best technicians that I've ever found have come through initiatives where on my own I'm reaching out to other partnerships, refugee ministries. There was a military base not terribly far from where I was, and so reaching out to there to help place military wives who are looking for jobs for a couple of years while they're stationed there. We've contacted all of the local colleges to try to get students PRN jobs. The job fairs for high school students is a great way. Whatever you can do to try to create pipelines of recruiting where maybe after you find one or two successful employees from there and they have a good experience and that starts to build a relationship with that resource and maybe their friends hear about it, you can eventually work your way to a place of having a steady stream of applicants come in through that pipeline. Now, that doesn't mean that you're, standing on Market Street with a stack of flyers handing them out every Saturday, but just building some of those relationships in the community where they're thinking to send you applicants rather than just the sit and wait kind of approach of hoping that they're going to see your posting on Indeed and send it to you. I don't know if those tips are helpful. Have you all found those types of activities beneficial?
Normally, yes, but I also want to say that sometimes, as we know, the CS world can be quite small. So your techs are also a good resource. If they're a really good tech, they might know somebody.
Right.
And they can help recruit that person in as well.
Yeah, for sure. One last thing on recruiting here, job postings in particular. Is there anything that you all have seen that has been creative or clever in helping a job posting be more attractive to people, whether advertising, newly updated pay rates or no experience required or things like that, that's helped draw in some applicants that maybe managers could take to their HR department to try out?
Sign up bonuses.
Yeah, we've done all of those things. I'm sure that a part of our school initiative will have a billboard and we'll have some advertising and some PR opportunity, but definitely incentivizing as well. If you have some administrative dollars to throw at the requisition, that might be a way to get people in.
If your department has just gone through a renovation, something like that, they could use that to say, brand new department, brand new equipment, or, stuff like that helps as well.
State of the art.
That's right. Yeah, whatever you can do to paint the picture that this is a training opportunity, that this career field is worth your time and we will train you to do it. We will invest those resources in you. This is almost like a paid internship, if you will, of onboarding. We will get you certified. Those types of ways of couching the discussion can be really helpful and honestly truthful. We're not duping anybody into this. Sterile processing is an awesome career field, and for somebody to step into it and be motivated by it and educated and trained in it really is for their benefit. And so whatever you can do to advertise that, I think, is useful. All right. Before we move on to keeping the all-stars that you've got, one more question about recruiting them, and it has to do with your comments, Tracy, about interviewing. So we talked about evaluating resumes, what you like to see. What are you looking for in that interview that helps you distinguish between somebody who's going to be a tremendous resource for your department and somebody who maybe isn't going to be so easily motivated?
Yeah, so I like to use questions that help pull out stuff from their past, right? So asking questions, how do you handle, especially if they've been in a customer service field, how did you handle that angry customer? Because as you know, we can get a phone call from the OR, they're stressed, they're yelling, and they're in essence an angry customer. So how do you deal with that? I always ask the question, what motivates you to get out of bed? because that's going to tell me, in essence, what helps them get up and go to work. One of my favorite questions that I always ask is, what is the difference between being accountable and being responsible as a technician? That's going to explain to me a lot in terms of, are they going to be accountable to their own learning, to their own mistakes? Are they going to own up and grow? Or are they the type that are going to say, it wasn't me, I didn't do it? You know, so
Right.
I look for that too. It's really a combination of being that customer service person, because not only are our customers the OR, the patients, and the doctors, but our customers are each other in the department. Our team members are our customers as well. So do they have that sense of teamwork and wanting to build the team and helping each other learn and grow? That I feel is really there as well.
Absolutely. And if any of you listening think that that sounds great and you want to research further, it sounds like what you were describing, Tracy, is a type of behavioral-based interviewing. Behavioral-based interviewing is that style of interviewing that asks questions about past experiences, because it's our belief that past performance indicates future performance, though not necessarily. And it's a lot harder to blow smoke through an interview when you're being asked to give specific details about a time when you encountered a specific situation and how you handled that situation.
Yeah.
And so go through your department values. What are the things that you want to see out of a technician, like teamwork, customer service, hard work and motivation, care for a patient? And craft very careful questions that would give you an indication for how that person is going to measure up in those types of categories. And that'll go a long way. Might make your interviews a lot longer. You might have 45-minute interviews, but it's worth it. Another comment that came through on the Q&A that's really helpful around this topic is, in your interviews, be honest with people about the work environment. We don't want to paint a picture of perfection and this lovely work environment in sterile processing if you've got some real challenges. If your decon is 82 degrees, which it shouldn't be, but if it is and you're still working on that and that's a challenge, before you sign them to day one orientation, you need to get them in there and be honest about the type of work, the type of schedule, and make sure that people are comfortable with it. And I thought that was a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, and one other thing that might be useful is do your 45-minute in interview, but then have them sit 15 minutes with a couple techs from your department and have them talk, because sometimes they might pick up on something that the respective person might not have told you or brought up.
Yeah, no, that's really good. If you can find technicians who'll put up with it and say, "Oh, I get the interview guy again," that's really good. Anything else before we move on? We're about halfway through our time. I want to make sure we give plenty of time to retaining and motivating.
I would just say that one thing that we've used is a tour of the department as a part of the interview. I think people without experience can definitely make a decision when they see the environment. Sometimes it's fearful as soon as they walk in and they're like, this is not for me, and you have to respect that. But I think for experienced techs or those that have experience, they get a chance to see the workflow and compare it to what they're experienced. And whether or not it's something that is similar to what they're used to or completely out of the normal, and confuses them right away. So, others look for volume and see a challenge, and, others look at equipment and say, you're outdated. So, I think that the tour helps to set the mind state for the candidate.
Yeah, I think so too. So, we've got our technicians in the door now, and we're trying to keep them, and that's getting harder in the industry as labor costs go up and competitive compensation rates, and for all the different potential motivations we already talked about people and their perception of what the good life is in terms of work. So where do you think organizations and sterile processing departments in particular are going wrong with their retention strategy of trying to keep their sterile processing all-stars?
Doing the same thing you've always done. We get stuck in, and I'm not just sterile processing. I think in life we do what feels comfortable. We do what we always know worked up to a certain extent. And I think, we're challenging ourselves to look at that in the current state and say, what does that look like now? And sometimes you don't really know. So I think that taking different approaches, being open to new perspectives, sometimes getting input from your staff is a good way to understand what they want, what their goals are, where they intend to be, maybe asking if they have a 5-year goal, and then helping them, to develop steps to meet that goal, even if they're not SPD centric. We've had employees that want to be anesthesiologists, and that's okay. Being transparent from their point of view can help us to put them in touch with the right people, show them how SPD contributes to that field they want to go into. And sometimes maybe they stay with SPD overall after they find out more details. But I think you need to probe, and whatever that probing entails, other leaders, other institutes, technicians, other SPD managers and other institutes in seminars like this.
I love that you said that, Leroy, specifically about knowing what the goals of your technicians are, because we can get a bit protective as sterile processing managers. Our role is to take care of those patients and give account for our resources in sterile processing, and that turnover percent number is going to end up on kind of our performance report for the department. But in all truthfulness, not all turnover is bad turnover. And I don't just mean employees leaving that maybe are a help to the department if they're gone. Even some high performers leaving the department sometimes can be a good thing, because you've helped them reach their goal. And so when you know what those goals are, and you are actively invested in helping grow that individual as a person and their career, that type of environment spreads, where people realize that they are cared about, that they are valued as a person. And it builds this culture where things are moving in that sterile processing department. That's not a place where you go for your career to die and you're stuck. That's a place where Leroy is going to actively work and help you meet your goals. Now, we have to be somewhat selective about it. A nursing student who's 3 months away from graduating might not be the best timeline for us. But as you bring somebody on that is actively interested in getting into anesthesia, and you help them along the way, and maybe help them craft a resume to be able to kill that first interview, that those types of actions, those selfless actions that demonstrate that we're about our employees' growth and their best interests, is really contagious and can help build a culture of teamwork and retention. I think that's really useful.
Yeah. And, also I think, we need to help our technicians with that work-life balance as well. As we know, the department can be stressful, and we might have young mothers, young fathers, that they might once a month want to attend one of their children's functions, let's say. So try to find a way to somewhat be flexible so that those technicians can have a good work-life balance and still meet the productivity needs and getting the sets done. I find that they will give you a lot more in return, in terms of, I'll stay extra, I'll come in earlier, I'll help do this, if you help them with their work-life balance.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Tracy with that. We have someone who, when her children were young, would not be able to come to work at her time that she's supposed to be here, because she didn't have a babysitter at that time. So she would say, listen, like, I can't come in, but I can come in later. Is that okay? Absolutely. You're still going to be in, you're going to be productive. And if you can, that is the best thing, is to be flexible. It's better than them just calling off and using their time or not getting paid because they don't have any time. Let them be flexible and work with them. And if it means, like, it's only 4 hours, hey, it's 4 hours they would not have been here.
Right. So what I'm hearing from all three of you is creativity. Be creative. Find ways to make it happen. There are limitations to that, obviously, that we can't, create our way out of any particular problem, and we have to treat people with fairness and have to uphold policy. Right? We can't create beyond the lines of what we're allowed to. But think of creative ways that you can add value for your team. I'm sure that the big question in everybody's mind about retention has to do with compensation rates. Compensation is really important. And I can fully understand somebody in my office saying that, I love this job, I love these people, but I got to feed my family, and this is a great opportunity. And we celebrate those people and let them move on, but it hurts. And so anything in particular that you would say is kind of been one of your secret sauces for keeping technicians, particularly when you know that you're not leading the market in compensation and the hospital across the street will pay them a couple bucks more an hour?
I think sometimes that secret sauce is the culture that you have in the department. Do you have one of the better cultures in the area? You might know something about the hospital across the street and their culture isn't there. You may just give them ideas of a way to ask questions or someone to talk to that who works there or something like that, so they at least have the full picture before they leave. Because granted, your facility's not always going to say, all right, well, we'll raise the pay to keep this person. But once you do it for one, you have to do it for all. I'm not... Mm-hmm. I don't like when they'll say, well, I'll give this person extra, but no one else does. That's not fair either.
Right.
So maybe it's celebrating and pointing out the differences in the cultures.
Yeah, I think that that's big. To be able to do that, you have to first develop that culture. Right. But people do stay for bosses who are invested in their growth and for teammates that they love. They've built friendships there because the culture is so collaborative. So it can be done. One other thought on compensation and creativity. I've been a part of an organization that was struggling to keep up with the market. And what we found was happening is that the majority of people that we were losing weren't necessarily our entry-level technicians who were interested in sterile processing and were grateful for the training. It was the people who had been in it for 7 to 10 years who had the experience and the resume to go land a job somewhere else. And so the way that they restructured the department was to create some lower paying entry level kind of sterile processing assistant or associate type roles where they would primarily be responsible for transporting case carts, doing some case picking, and then elevating the job title of the more experienced technician to a higher rate and redeploy some of the savings that they made on the associate level positions to those experienced technicians. And what that accomplished was, the employees who were going to stay were the certified, experienced technicians, and it also gave them an opportunity to focus more of their skill set on those jobs like surgical instrument inspection that required a high degree of skill and experience to be able to do well, and helped draw them away from some of those more menial tasks of unloading the cart washer and transporting carts around. That's just one model. It's one way to do it, but I thought it was a really creative way to get their experienced certified technicians up to the market level of competitive so that they could hang on to them. It made it a little harder to recruit new technicians. So you're just trading one problem for another. But I thought, that was one way to be creative, even with something that seems as rigid as a hard no from finance about compensation rates. So
yeah, and to that point, you could have, like you said, the different levels, Tech 1, Tech 2, Tech 3. So where I'm currently at, your Tech 1 are your green, right? Tech 2, you've been there a while, you have your certification. To be able to move to a Tech 2, you need to get an additional one. So it helps to grow your techs, but it also helps to give them more compensation based on the level of experience and certifications.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, retaining employees, super important. Sometimes the reason that people leave is not related to compensation. It's not even related to old equipment or anything like that, but just the general culture and work environment. And so if you're in one of those situations where you have some really high performers, but you also have some kind of cultural cancers in the department, what are some things that you can do as a leader to help neutralize the impact of those cultural conflicts and whether or not your high performers decide to stay?
I think that we could use a little bit of the last conversation and go into this one, which is a career ladder. I think when you establish a career ladder and you have the opportunity to show your technicians that they have a future, they can grow into becoming an instrument specialist, or maybe the endoscope specialist on flexible endoscopes or whatever it may be. I think that the people that you will see grow the most are the ones that want to grow. And it can, I think, in turn, identify the people who are not willing to grow, or the ones that are okay with where they are. And then at the other extreme, it can also point out those people that are really more of a cancer and negative force in the department, because maybe they don't even take the minimal suggestions to move up to a standard processing. So I think that you could evaluate the situation of your entire tech force by having some future incentives to look forward to that come with a financial increase. If you're going to require multiple certifications, is there, those each job description changes, do they come with an increase? Those things can help people to look forward to the future, and maybe even volunteer for a project that might put them in a position to be up for that position next. A lot of times our particular network likes to see you do the work before the acknowledgement. So you may be on a project for 6 months before you even realize that somebody's paying attention to your performance. And then that becomes an opportunity later for growth. So I think, having a solid culture as a maybe institute, and then having a solid culture in your department that you show care and long-term investment.
So I think when you have you have a negative person, it creates that cancer, and you need to have some form of a belief or a behavioral a type of thing that you can hold them accountable for. And then you could have discussions with them. This is what's going on. This is what we're seeing. This is what you need to do to get better. And if they don't, unfortunately, for the benefit of your department and everybody's sanity, you really need to help them out the door. Help them find something that they can grow and be successful at that is not going to be where you're at.
Yeah. I like what you said about having something that you can